Hey. Well, good afternoon, everyone. How many of you watched the Democratic presidential debate last night? A little quiz. Who won the Democratic presidential debate last night? I did. I dominated the debate last night. And here was their complaint. They said all he's doing is stopping everything the House is sending over and confirming conservative judges. I plead guilty. Thank you, Ralph, for a great introduction and for your leadership in developing this outstanding organization that believes in the kind of America that we think we ought to have. Won't surprise you to know that I'm frequently asked what being the majority leader of the Senate is like. I've thought about it for a while, and I've come up with a perfect answer. It's a little bit like being the groundskeeper at a cemetery. Everybody's under you, but no one is listening. So what is it that I get to do that the other 99 don't get to do? Ralph already said it. It's to decide what we're going to do. And the single biggest decision I've made since I've been majority leader of the Senate was a decision not to do something. And it was not to fill the vacancy created by the Justice Scalia death in the middle of the presidential election. And as Ralph pointed out, we are beginning to see the results. The president has made outstanding selections. Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh. But my friends, you probably already know that most cases never make it to the Supreme Court. The next step down is the circuit judges. The next step down is the district judges. Most complex litigation doesn't get past the circuit court level. They are extremely important. There were a lot of vacancies left when President Obama left office. I was the majority leader the last couple of years he was president. We didn't have a lot of time to fill all those vacancies. This is a pretty alert crowd, Ralph. So we had lots of opportunities, and we didn't waste them. We did 30 circuit judges the first 2 years. That's a record pace for any administration in the history of the country. We're now at 41. We'll soon be adding 2 additionally. So let's put that figure in context. About 1 out of 4 of every circuit judge in the whole country has been appointed by this president, confirmed by this Senate in 2.5 years. Let's look at it a different way. Let's compare the age of the Trump nominees at the time of appointment to the age of the Obama nominees for the circuit court at the age of appointment. This president's are 4 years younger at the start than President Obama. For example, 1 week recently, we confirmed a 37-year-old woman to the 4th Circuit and a 39-year-old man to the 6th Circuit in the same week. Let's look at it a different way. Of the circuit judges in the country right now, the Trump appointees are 10 years younger than the Obama appointees. So you get the drift. What the president is looking for and sending up to us are highly qualified young men and women who believe in the quaint notion that the job of a judge is to follow the law. You wouldn't think that'd be controversial, but it actually is. President Obama tipped his hand when he said he wanted to appoint judges who had empathy. Think about that a minute. If you're the litigant for whom the judge has empathy, you're in pretty good shape. But what if you aren't? What if you aren't? Justice Scalia said you're not a very good judge if you're not occasionally uncomfortable with the outcome you reach because your job is to try to follow the law. And he would also say if you want to make policy, you ought to run for office. That's not what we do here. Justice Gorsuch said we don't wear red robes or blue robes, we wear black robes. So the kind of people the president is putting on the bench are young, strict constructionists who believe that the job of a judge is to follow the law. I think that's the single most long-lasting contribution we can make to the country. I was obviously pretty excited election night when the president got elected. I don't know about you, but I didn't think he was going to win. But when it dawned on me at 1:30 in the morning we were going to have the House, the Senate, and the White House, I began to think about how unusual that is. Only 20 of the last 100 years, just 20, 1/5 of the time, have Republicans had the presidency, the House, and the Senate at the same time. I said to myself, this might not last very long. And sure enough, 2 years later, we're back to divided government. But we tried to maximize in the last Congress, in every way we could, the things that we thought would get the country going and growing again. And even though I'm not here today to talk about the economy, I think it's noteworthy that as a result of tax reform and regulatory relief, we have a 50-year low unemployment and 3% growth, GDP growth last year. Obama didn't have a single year of 3% GDP growth. So we delivered a healthy economy. We're making long-term changes to the country through the court system. And we're going to keep on doing it. And my motto for the next year and a half is leave no vacancy behind. Let me talk a little bit about how challenging they've made it. You already know this because you follow this very closely, but the Senate, unlike the House, is in the personnel business. We have an executive calendar, we have a legislative calendar. And there are various devices, I've engaged in some of them myself over the years, to make the wheels turn a little more slowly. But boy, have they made the executive calendar challenging for us. Just to give you an example, if you look back at the first 2 years of each of the last 6 presidents, the number of times the majority leader had to do what's called file cloture to advance a nomination, any kind of nomination, only 24 times cumulatively over 6 presidents in the first 2 years. I had to do it 128 times the last Congress. So I want you to know they haven't made it easy. And the reason they haven't made it easy, they're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Whatever he's for, they're against. It doesn't make any difference what it is. We even had a challenge this week passing a bill to provide humanitarian assistance that is not in debate, definitely needed for the crisis at the border. We managed to get it out of the Senate 84-8, and the Speaker only in the last hour or so agreed to pass the House bill. Why? Because the President was willing to sign it. So it must have been flawed. So that's been the work environment around here since divided government has been restored by the American people. Now, I, with a smile on my face, declared myself recently the Grim Reaper. And I want you to know why I embraced and applied that term to myself. As long as I'm majority leader of the Senate, we will not be taking up and we will not be passing things like the Green New Deal and Medicare for None. Oh, and it gets worse. You may not have heard they have in mind statehood for the District of Columbia. 2 Democratic senators. Statehood for Puerto Rico. 2 Democratic senators. And you may or may not know that the number of Supreme Court justices is actually set by statute. Not to take a constitutional amendment or anything like that. It doesn't take a constitutional amendment to admit a state. It can all be done by a simple statute. So then they're going to pack the Supreme Court. They're going to increase the number to make our current 5-4 strict constructionist majority irrelevant. So you bet, as long as I'm majority leader of the Senate, we're not doing stuff like that. So what we're confronting here, my friends, for the first time in my political career, and I have been here a while. I'm now the longest serving Republican Senate leader in history. I broke Bob Dole's record about a year ago. I called him up. He took it well. As you know, he has a wicked sense of humor. So I've seen quite a lot. But what I have not seen before is a real debate about something as fundamental to our country as whether we should have the free enterprise system or not. I mean, they want to turn us into something we've never been. And what I want you to fully understand is that a lot of socialist countries have voted it in. It didn't take a coup like in Venezuela or Cuba. They voted it in because they couldn't resist the temptation of what Margaret Thatcher once said about socialism. She said the problem with socialism is pretty soon you run out of other people's money. And so this is a threat to America as it has always been. At its core, a free enterprise economy, not without compassion. We have plenty of compassionate programs. Medicare, Social Security, programs for disadvantaged people of one kind or another. We're not a capitalist country without compassion. But we are at our core an opportunity society. When the immigrants arrived here over the centuries, they came here not for a guarantee, but for an opportunity. For many of them, it was freedom of religion or flights from oppression of one kind or another. They came here not for a guarantee, but for an opportunity to go as far as their talents would take them. And that's been the core of this country from the very, very beginning. And it's all going to be debated next year. I never thought I'd be in the middle of a debate about socialism in this country. So in addition to my excitement over being the biggest winner last night in the presidential debate, there is a sobering thought about what they're all talking about. They're all talking about turning us into a socialist country, all of them. So don't think, no matter who wins the nomination, even if he or she may ultimately say, oh, I'm a moderate. Look at what they're saying, not what they're calling themselves. And so we cannot let these people get control of the government. I don't know. what's going to happen in the House of Representatives. There's no guarantee on the presidential election. There's no guarantee on the majority in the Senate. But I can tell you this, if the U.S. Senate is the last place standing, none of this stuff will pass while I'm the majority leader. One of the issues they backtracked on that you and I care a great deal about that is also alarming. We all know what the Hyde Amendment is. We all know that whether you were pro-choice or pro-life, for over a quarter of a century, we've accepted the Hyde Amendment as a kind of basic standard. That even if you might not have agreed with a pro-life crowd like all of us, at least you'd agree that you didn't think taxpayer funding ought to be provided for it. They're all backing away from that. Have you noticed that? They demanded of Joe Biden that he do a backflip on an issue that even he, who's basically not in the same place we are on life issues, agreed. So this consensus we had reached during these contentious years since 1973 on that issue is now up in the air. That basic notion. So as the American public becomes more and more aware of when life begins because of the advances in technology that is producing more and more people sympathetic to the pro-life position, our Democratic friends are going in the opposite direction. Headlong in the opposite direction. So, I've had, because I do have the ability to schedule, several bills that we all care about up in the Senate. We've not been able to get 60, but I can tell you it's hard to get Democrats anymore on the pro-life side of any issue. So, excuse my cough. Things that we care about are all on the ballot next year. In the Congress, at the White House, in the courts. It's a struggle to control as much of the government as possible. But we're all in this together. And I confess to have said this a couple of times in the past, that I thought that particular year's election was the most important ever. I was wrong. I was wrong. We've never had a debate like this, at least in the last 3 decades. This is a big one, a really big one. And if we can hang on and beat back the socialists, we can save this country for your children and for your grandchildren. With your hope, with your help, and your prayers, I want you to know I'll be standing there stopping this stuff for sure. Thank you.